Hi, my name is Carmen, and I am an early childhood special education teacher, a life and ADHD coach, and I'm the host of this podcast, Authentically ADHD. I created this podcast to help anyone wondering if they have ADHD, people who have been diagnosed for a while and want some more support and community. I'm here to bring you the latest research on ADHD and neurodiversities while we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of ADHD. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing? How are you? I'm doing all right. I feel like the summer is going by really fast, but I am recording this quite a bit ahead of time, so I do feel good about it. I do feel good about going back to work it's less than a month now, and I've started an unmasking course by Haley Honeyman. She's the busy bee with ADHD, and it's really, really good. I have been benefiting from this course, and it kind of inspired the podcast topic for today. I am super happy you pressed play because self-trust is a big thing for us. We don't have it, and we don't have it for a few reasons. So today we are going to talk about what self-trust is. We're going to talk about what is it, what's the base. We're going to talk about why don't we as ADHDers have it, and, give you some actionable steps to start rewriting that narrative and start gaining some self-trust. I used to believe that I couldn't trust myself with anything. I always thought, I never do what I say I'm going to do. I never follow through. How can I actually trust myself? So if you feel that way, it's totally relatable, and in my opinion, it's normal. It makes sense that we don't trust ourselves, and we are going to dive deep. Like usual, trigger warning. This work is deep. We don't do shallow things here. We stay authentic. So going through it with a therapist and or coach is a great companion. So, are you ready? Let's get started. So, the reason that this topic is so important is because not having self-trust means you rely on external factors and others' opinions to determine how you make decisions and what you decide. And what we want, what's healthy, is to have an internal locus of evaluation instead of external. This is where we can rely on ourselves, our own perceptions, and make decisions from a grounded place in ourselves. It's also important because lack of self-trust can erode your confidence, cause anxiety and depression, and it's just overall not mentally healthy. Now, the reason that the unmasking course brought up thoughts about self-trust and wanting to talk about it is because the two kind of mirror each other. Self-trust is the work that I never knew I needed. And then when I went through some unmasking processes, I realized that they are similar in the ways that they work. So you may be wondering, what is self-trust? Because it's not always doing what you say you're going to do. That's more like perfectionism. Self-trust is just believing yourself and knowing yourself, and knowing that you will take care of yourself no matter what. It's having confidence in your abilities, validation in your emotions and experiences, and knowing that you'll know what to do even if you mess up. So how do you know if you have self-trust? Well, the basis of this is, what does your self-talk sound like? I know I sound like a broken record, but are you nice to you? Or do you have thoughts like, why can't you just remember? You can never be on time. You should be trying harder. If you have thoughts like that often, then you don't have self-trust unless you truly believe those statements. And even then, I don't believe that that would create self-trust, like healthy self-trust. We all have self-narratives, whether you adopted it or created it. When that self-narrative is negative, it erodes our self-confidence, worth, trust, and our identity. Now, the other part of this is growing up neurodivergent in a neurotypical world is some trauma, right? This kind of stuff is the reason why we don't have self-trust. If you grew up and you had a relationship that eroded that self-trust, or it eroded in school, or you were undiagnosed neurodivergent, so you used masking so much that your identity isn't yours. It's what you want other people to perceive you as. Now, I do have some great news. It's not your fault. That's the good news. It is not your fault. Self-trust is a developmental process that we should have been taught, and it should have been modeled by good enough caregivers throughout childhood by mirroring your emotions, validating your experiences, and believing in your perceptions. So if your primary caregiver or caregivers did not do this, like when a parent doesn't or can't validate, mirror, and believe in your emotions, perceptions, and experiences, we as the child learn that we can't trust ourselves. We do this out of the complementary moral defense, which is a nature of believing the caregiver because it's safe and because the caregiver is right, making the child bad and wrong. It's a warped system, but this is what our brains do. Even if it's not your parents, any caregiver or adult in your life who impacts you in a bigger way can erode your self-trust. The education system can erode your self-trust. Even some of the workforces can erode your self-trust as an adult. Growing up neurodiverse in a neurotypical world, even just that can erode your self-trust. The media, parents, teachers, coaches, other adults, and family members. Your inner self-talk that's so negative and shaming probably was developed through what you picked up on in childhood when people said things to you, about you, even about others, talking to others, not even talking to you, but you adopt a thought that somebody who you view as a caretaker, an adult in your childhood, they say something to another adult and you adopt it as your identity. Well, at least part of your identity. When you have low self-trust, it is very difficult to reach goals, grow, professionally and personally. It's a huge hindrance on our autonomy and sense of self. For example, a little girl who adopts the thought that girls can't be lawyers may impede her from becoming one of the best lawyers in the city. Or even just believing that you can't take care of yourself may lead you down the road to never get pets or have kids, because how could you take care of other living things if you can't even take care of yourself? That's how eroding a lack of self-trust can be. It's definitely not something that should be taken lightly. Like I said before, it's actually the work I didn't know I needed. Self-trust is the basis of a lot. It's how much you do or don't believe in yourself, and it makes up your ability to manage not only your ADHD, but to have a higher quality of life. Now, like I said, this wasn't your fault. It isn't your fault. It was supposed to be developed in childhood, but unfortunately now it is your responsibility to do the work, which feels super unfair. I know, but unfortunately, this is what happens when the neurodivergents grow up undiagnosed, unnoticed, invalidated, and we end up having to do the work as adults. Because, unfortunately, the negative self-talk won't stop until you take control of it. I promise you. Ask me how I know. It won't stop until you notice it, identify it, and maybe even write it down. And look at it. Write it down, seriously, and look at it. Are these things true? Do you actually believe them? Or are they adopted from someone else? We take on a lot of this from outside of us, which makes it painful because sometimes it can lead you to not really knowing who you even are because you're made up of all these adopted thoughts that probably aren't even true. So start noticing that internal voice and write it down, and then tell yourself why it's not true and not valid. This is a great way to start the self-trust process. Another great way to start practicing self-trust is by asking yourself, for real, what do I need? How do I feel? And then validate those needs and emotions. Write down why it's valid that you feel the way you feel or that what you need is what you need. Believe yourself and acknowledge your perception of the world. List out the things you love to do and do them more. Wear what you want, when you want. Eat what you want, when you want. Design and decorate your home in ways that work for you and in ways that you love, in ways that are aesthetically pleasing to you. I want to let you know that all of these tips are researched, suggested by coaches and or therapists, and I've done them. My authenticity here wouldn't be so authentic if I gave you tips that I've never tried or used. So I never do give you tips that I haven't tried or used. That wouldn't be very authentic of me, and that's part of my brand. Another way to build self-trust is to write a list of accomplishments, things you're proud of, things that you've achieved. This will help you build up evidence in your brain that you do, in fact, do what you say you're going to do. Even though it's not the definition of self-trust, it helps build up that positivity. When you can't follow through or make a mistake, the goal is to truly believe in yourself, to always find out what to do and know what you'll do to take care of yourself, no matter what. Practice the sense of self-compassion and validation of your perceptions and your emotions. Another way to practice the self-trust is taking that negative inner talk and reframing it into positive ways that you could spin. Like, oh, I might always be running late, but when I do get to where I'm going, I put my all into what I am doing and where I am. Another way that this could be said is, if you have a negative internal belief of, I never follow through on working out, you could say that working out isn't something that I do, but what I do for my body is movement, and I move in a way that I enjoy. Those are some ways that you can reframe that negative self-talk to help you build up that self-trust. So, we've talked about what self-trust is, why we don't have it, and we established that it is our responsibility to build up our own self-trust, and even though it's not our fault, and we did validate that that's not fair and it shouldn't feel fair, we went through some actionable ways you can begin to build that self-trust by identifying that negative self-talking and acknowledging it, challenging it, and reframing those thoughts, practicing compassion, patience, and validation of your needs, emotions, and perceptions of the world. If you need more support, which you most likely will because this is a heavy topic, please seek help by a medical professional, a doctor, a therapist, or even a coach if you choose. I really hope you can walk away from this episode with some actionable steps to start building that self-trust. I believe in you. So I hope that you can believe in you too. That's all I have for now. Stay authentic, my friends, and we will talk soon. Speaking of extra supports, I just wanted to tell you all that I've updated my Patreon page to include all of the resources that I've really ever made to be held in one place. Just head to my show notes. The VIP members do get a little extra, but you can also purchase like my brand new Ultimate ADHD journal and planner, which I've been using for the past year that has worked. Nothing is priced over $10 and everything is at least 50 to 100 pages that you can download and print. You can get it to bind it and sent to you, or you can just read it off your screen and use notebook paper. So if you want or need any type of that kind of extra support, just head to my show notes and click the Patreon link to join. I hope to see you in there.